Hello there, let's look at services today. My name is Waithera from Kodarasa. Some domain operations can't find a home in entity or value objects. They're different, they're not going to be domain objects in this case. They're more of activities, they're more of actions that are going to be more of operations for other things, and they're not domain objects on their own. You'll find them in your system with names like manager, controller, orchestrator. You've seen such files in your code base. Watch out for such. Then you can find places where you can find examples of services. But one thing to be clear on, this is on the domain level. We're not talking about the infrastructure level. This is just on the domain level. For instance, in the student example, you'll have student manager, you'll have a student controller, you'll have a student orchestrator. There's such creative names. Watch out for such creative names. Ideally, a service is an operation that is offered as a standalone interface without encapsulating state. You should never have state in your service. This is very key. Unlike what we have for entities, unlike what we have for value objects. So what do they do instead? They're mostly there to emphasize relationships with other domain objects. Let's look at some need to know when it comes to services. Services, names for an activity, an action rather than an entity. Think of services more like verbs, more like place them as doing object rather than as nouns. Ideally, they're defined purely by what they can do for a client, what they can do for another entity, what they can do for different entities, performing operations that are interleaving the two different entities. That's where a service comes in. Ideally, a service should have a defined responsibility, and this responsibility should be defined as part of the domain. Also, be keen to add all these as part of your ubiquitous language. All these, the entity, the value object, the service, all these are still part of your ubiquitous language. They're part of your bounded context, and use that language moving forward. What are some characteristics of a good service? So a good service has operations that relate to a domain concept that are not natural part of an entity or a value object. And another thing is that the interface will be defined in terms of other domain elements. And last but not least, this is the only thing you should leave. If you live with anything, this should be it, is that services should be stateless. The operation is stateless. Services should have no state. They don't have their own data. They should not have state. It shouldn't matter how many times I run something. It's still almost interchangeable because it does not have state of its own. And that's it on services. My name is Waithera from Kodarasa once again. Thank you for watching. Bye.